that this many of you, including yourself, are aware that there is good news, exciting news, as opposed to bad news coming out of Hardwick. Hardwick is famous for many things, and good, positive headlines are generally have not been among them for about 70 years, maybe 80. I'm not saying that to disparage the town because it's the place that I chose to live, and I love it. But Hardwick has a history, a boom and bust kind of history of the granite industry. Hardwick had the greatest population of any town in Vermont at the turn of the century. There were 14,000 jobs in the granite industry alone in Hardwick. There are now 500 jobs in the whole town, a century later. All of the buildings in Hardwick were built in the same period of time, all with money made from granite. Many of them have fallen apart over the years, or our downtown redevelopment strategy is to burn them. So occasionally that happens, and last year a perfect thing happened. I don't mean good perfect, but I mean like typical. 16-year-olds drinking, he drives his car, misses a light, flips it and crashes it into a building downtown. It catches on fire and burns the whole inner core of the building down. I was like, oh my God, can we not escape this sort of thing that seems to happen there? Everybody was fine, and now the building's bought and getting renovated. So that's good. But Hardwick still has some of the lowest per capita income, highest rate of poverty in the state, some of the highest percentage of kids that qualify for the free and reduced lunch programs. But what you've had starting about 30 years ago, and I'm just going to do this real brief for you, but about 30 years ago you had sort of an infusion of back to the landers, like many that came up to Vermont. They were doing weird things like organic vegetables, and instead of milking cows, they were milking goats. And it was met, at least in our area, with pretty open arms. In many cases because the kids of the farmers in the 50s and 60s worked really hard when they were kids. And it was a pretty tough time to grow up in that area. And they left. And they didn't want to take on the farm. And here come all these flatlanders that don't know anything about how to do this stuff. And they need somebody to show them how to split wood, how to build a house, how to cut hay, how to milk cows, how to do all of these kinds of things. And so there was this interesting kind of infusion of energy into the area and new ideas, and that developed in the 70s and 80s, and then they started having kids. And then a sort of a new generation, many of whom are now in their 20s and 30s, began thinking about business and farming in a different kind of way. A lot of the first back to the landers that moved up, I think, had the perception, and I think I had this when I was growing up, that big is bad, business is bad, profit is bad. And so the newer generation of agricultural entrepreneurs, business owners, farmers, I think realized that a mission-based business is one wonderful way of doing good in the world. Providing food for your community is a pretty incredible thing, and if you can do more of it, growing 20 acres instead of 10 acres, if you can offer good wages to your folks that are helping you do that, those are wonderful kinds of things. And profit and managing it like a business is a key piece in making that happen. So in the last 5 years, there's been a critical mass of farmers and food-based businesses in the area that have been collaborating with each other at a pretty deep level. Been meeting regularly, been supporting each other, being cheerleaders for each other and mentors for each other, lending money back and forth to each other. And out of that has come an organization that's called the Center for an Agricultural Economy. This is a nonprofit that's main purpose was to help convene and organize all of the different efforts in the area, things you might call food system rebuilding efforts. Things happening in the town, in the schools, in other nonprofits, with other organizations, farms, businesses, whatever. There were so many different things going on that the concern that a lot of us had was that we'd be reinventing the wheel, or that we wouldn't have that we'd miss an opportunity to collaborate with each other, to really bump this up to the next level. And so what you've got across this country is this realization of all of these things about our current food system that aren't working, no matter what perspective you've got on it. Again, whether it's the environmental perspective, whether it's energy perspective, whether it's the nutritional perspective, or even a financial perspective. But you don't have too many examples of what the alternative is. We have a systemically broken food system, I would argue, with very few examples of a systemically healthy food system anywhere to look at. So remember that time when you had a tomato and you bit into it? Maybe you had it out of your garden and you bit into it and you tasted this tomato and you realized, oh my God, I don't know if I've ever had a real tomato before. This tastes so good. Sometimes it's also with strawberries or with olive oil, or some of these things where the difference between mediocre and excellent is really off the charts. It's hard to go back. So everybody in this country, I would argue, has not had the opportunity to taste the real tomato. They do not know what this healthy food system tastes like, looks like, feels like, or what the implications of it are for their own community, economically or health-wise or anything else. And Vermont and Hardwick is that real tomato. Now, it doesn't mean we're shipping things from here all over the place. We have to feed the country. But what it means is that in our little neck of the woods and across this whole state, we have some of the best examples anywhere on the planet of community-based food systems that have direct economic impact and health impact on the people in that community. That they are invested in it, that they own it, that it's not being co-opted by the Coca-Colas and the McDonald's of the world. And this is something that is desperately needed across this country and across this planet. So remember, this is where, in my mind, the work that we all do in our little communities has a huge cumulative effect to cause a tipping point across this whole country and light a fire under all of these different communities that are struggling with the same things that we are, but don't have an example to look at. So they might have a cool project over here, a local farm over here, or something they hear about over there. But when they look around and they see how messed up it all is, and they can look and see a place like Hardwick and a place like Vermont that is addressing these things systemically and having a lot of success, it gives them hope that it is possible. It is not a cookie cutter. There is no way that what is happening in Hardwick can happen the same way anywhere else. A truly local food system evolves out of the local soils, the demographics, the history, everything about that place, unique and different all over. And that's what it's supposed to be. But what we've got is the ability to inspire other regions, to light a fire under them, to talk about our process, our struggles, what's working, what's not working. And that has been an amazing outcome of the last 2 years of the sort of media attention that has happened. Hardwick kind of got discovered by the national media. And it's been very interesting, and it's had its challenges for sure, especially when they don't get the story right. But it has given a large voice to this issue. And I get emails and letters, as do a whole group of us there, on almost a daily basis from people all over the country saying, we are really inspired by what you guys in Vermont and Hardwick are doing. Can we come visit? Can you come out to tell us about what you're doing? Things like that. So I guess in closing, what I would say is to really recognize that your group and the industry within which you work is in a very critical point right now. And there is a great opportunity, and there are many people listening and interested in what you have to say. Connecting people to health through the food that they're eating and where that food comes from and the environmental and economic impact of that. But starting with what's in front of them, the plate, the bite of food, is a critical way in to get this kind of cascading change that we need to have happening across this planet. So don't underestimate the power that you have in what you might perceive to be a small organization in a small state.